Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, members of the Diplomatic Corps, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to another public lecture supported by the Australian National Centre for Latin American Studies and the Embassy of Colombia in Australia. Tonight we have two distinguished guests from Colombia to talk about challenges for Colombia in the Asia-Pacific region and with Australia. And before I introduce them, I'd like to say just maybe a couple of words about the significance of this topic. Perhaps only a few short years ago, it would have been thought perhaps very marginal to debate, to discuss Latin American countries and their involvement in the Asia-Pacific, because it's not that long ago, I think, that Latin America was seen as a place in the Western Hemisphere with its ties contained very largely in the Western Hemisphere of international relations, of economics and so on. Now I think we've seen, perhaps over the last decade or so, a very significant shift in many places in Latin America, including, not least in Colombia, towards what I might call the multi-directionality. That is, that many Latin American economies and political regimes as well are looking to build ties, not just in their own hemisphere, but elsewhere as well, with Europe and in particular with Asia. And here I think we have an example of two powerfully growing regions of the world, in Asia and in Latin America, which are increasingly connecting with each other. And I think that provides the background and the significance of this public lecture and discussion here tonight. Let me also take the opportunity to thank the Ambassador of Colombia, Mr. Gabriel Duque, and the Embassy and staff for supporting this lecture tonight and for providing the refreshments that you'll be enjoying after the lecture. There will be time after the lecture for questions and some discussion, but our two speakers, let me now introduce them briefly. Dr. Patti Londoño Jaramillo is Vice Minister of Multilateral Affairs since 2010. She has had many public policy posts in the Colombian government. Senior advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs from 2006 to 2007. She has been Ambassador and Deputy Permanent Alternate Representative to the Mission of Colombia to the United Nations 2005 to 2006. An advisor to the Office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Presidency of Colombia of the Non-Aligned Movement between 1995 and 1997. Senior advisor to the Office of the Vice President, Chief of Staff of the Vice President 2008-2009. Advisor to the Director of International Affairs and the Ministry of Justice and many others. But she's also had a long and distinguished academic career at the Universidad de los Andes, at the International Studies Research Center, and at the Universidad Externado de Colombia, where she was, or has been, professor and researcher between 1988 and 2009. She holds a doctorate from Universidad Nacional de Educación in Madrid, and she has postgraduate and undergraduate degrees from the University of Stockholm and the University of Geneva. And she has conducted conferences and workshops at many universities around the world, including Harvard, Uppsala, Stanford, and now the Australian National University. Dr. Gabriel Duque has been Vice Minister of Foreign Trade since January 2009. And as such, she is responsible for formulating, developing, and coordinating Colombian policy on international trade. Before joining the ministry, Dr. Duque was Deputy Director of in competitiveness of the Andean Development Corporation from 2006 to 2009. Previously, he served as the international negotiator in the ministry, where he represented Colombia during the last negotiation rounds of the Free Trade Agreement of the Americas, the FTAA, and was head negotiator on services for the Free Trade Agreement with the United States. He too has a very strong academic background. He holds a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering from Universidad de los Andes in Bogotá, a master in economics from the London School of Economics, and a doctorate in economics from New York University. And prior to assuming his position, he worked at Universidad de los Andes, being Director of Industrial Engineering, the Industrial Engineering Department, the undergraduate coordinator and professor there. And he's held academic posts in Barcelona and at New York University. To say a few words of welcome and further introduction of our guests tonight from Colombia, I'd like to welcome to the podium the Ambassador of Colombia, Mr. Gabriel Duque.
happy to receive tonight our fellow Colombians. We appreciate a lot the company of this auditorium tonight, the ambassadors, the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, Ambassador of Argentina, friends from Latin America, students and professors, members of the FAC who are with us tonight. We welcome all of you. We hope that you find interesting this overview of the Colombian and diplomatic interest of our country in the Asia-Pacific region. And I hope that the intervention of Patti, Londoño, and Professor Duque is of interest to you. We would also like to thank Professor John Leeds and his small but efficient team for making this possible tonight. Thanks.
Dr. Patti, Londoño.
Hello everyone. We are here and we want to thank you, the University and the Deans for organizing this event. We are very proud and honored to be here today. We have been in Australia for 2 days. We did some bilateral work in Sydney, and now we did today some bilateral work here in Canberra. Tomorrow we'll also be here in the morning, and then we will continue up to New Zealand. Colombia is it's a successful story, and I know that probably for many years you heard a lot of bad news about Colombia, a country with a great complexity, a lot of difficulties, but we have proven to ourselves and to the world that we could be different, that we could make changes, real changes in our own societies, and now we can go to the world and we can start promoting what Colombia is, the economic advantages, our institutional strengths, our strong democracy, so we can be good partners for Australia and good partners for different countries in the Asia-Pacific region. Colombia is focused right now in 2 main priorities. Latin America, of course, because it's our national region. We have engaged in several Latin American mechanisms. We are chairing UNASUR with the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Colombia. And if you have seen Colombia last year, we have a lot of regional difficulties. So I think what we have managed to go through is to work in unity and respecting diversity. That has been a key issue for us. Looking for unity in Latin America and respecting the diverse positions and systems that we have in Latin America. And the second priority is the Asia and the Pacific. And that's why we are here. We are making this tour with the Vice Minister of Trade. And we want to, and he will start exploring those issues of APEC, and he will tell you about the Pacific Alliance that we have created with our partners, Peru, Chile, and Mexico. And so we want to be partners in Australia. We have had amazing good meetings here, and there is there are many opportunities for us to grow together. And we want Australia and Australians to look at Colombia more closely. We have a very positive engagement, not only with our presence here in Canberra and in Sydney. We have a consul in Sydney, but we also have 10,000 students from Colombia in Australia. We are the second largest Latin American community of students from Latin America. So we believe that these students speak really positive on Colombia. It means that with great effort and vision they have come to this great land. So we want Australia also to look at us, to know more about us, and that's why, and that's what Vice Minister Duque is going to present to you And then at the end we can have some exchange of views, we can get comments from you, and we can have
Introduce Dr. Gabriel Duque.
Thank you very much. Thanks especially Professor Nils and Center for Latin American Studies for this opportunity to address you. As Patti mentioned, we're in this tour trying to raise up awareness and try to raise the profile of Colombia in the region. So what I've prepared here is a short presentation on the economic dimensions, on why we're doing what we're doing, and some sort of recent developments in the country that I think are interesting to point out. To finish with some sort of ideas on how we're trying to build bridges between the country, the Colombia, and this part of the world. So first of all, for those of you, which I hope are very few, we're going to point out a few big facts about the country. That medium-sized country colored in red on the north and western corner of South America. The oceans with the frontiers both with Atlantic, access to the Atlantic Ocean and to the Pacific, with the frontiers with Venezuela, Brazil, Ecuador, and Peru. Not many people know about this, but we are the third largest population-wise economy in Latin America. A report is that yesterday we reached 46 million people. This is of course, so it's a big. In terms of GDP, we are behind obviously Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina, but not for too long. Compared to the world with 29 in population size and with 32nd in GDP. We're around measuring in PPPs half of the size of Australia, having twice as much the population. So three things we should point out about the dramatic change of Colombia, as Patti was mentioning. We're fighting, we're struggling with this bad image we've carried from the past, but what we face is a complete dramatic change in the last 8 years in the country. And the first dimension, and it's easy, I'm going to use the former president review as sort of line of thought to try to explain the dimensions of this change. The first one is, of course, security. It was the priority of the last government. Security with democratic values, as President Uribe used to say. And the pink line is the perception of the private sector on the importance of security as a barrier to business and the actual it's a perception of the business community on security as a problem. So that has sort of nearly vanished and disappeared. We're not claiming that we have completely solved the security problem, but we have come a long way. And in parallel to that, we've seen the economic growth, which is the blue line you see out there. We were, of course, hit by the economic downturn of the 2008 and 2009 global financial crisis, but we never reached negative numbers. So we're catching up again. So we've had the steady growth that has come side by side on the progress we've made in the security aspect. That, of course, has helped us solve many or make progress on many of the other dimensions important for growth of the economy. So we have the security as one of the dimensions. The second one is social cohesion or opportunities for all. You cannot build a strong, stable democracy if you don't offer opportunities for everybody. So what we've made in major progress, we think, is in also working towards social provision of certain services and also inclusion and opportunities for most of the population. So we see the poverty line going down, and this is one of the dimensions that President Santos has cut off. And we've, as you might know, we have a new government. Sort of, we don't know yeah, still if to call it new because we were in offices since last August 7. But his President Santos has said that if he's going to be measured by something, it's going to be the security dimension, the how much we can reduce the level of poverty and extreme poverty, and the other one, the third dimension, is the economic dimension, which is employment. So on the social dimension, we've made some progress in the poverty line, and also something that has been noted by the HMO, World Health, WHO, is in the progress we've made in the provision of health insurance. We have over 93% coverage in health insurance, and we were just around 50% only 8 years ago, and that's going up. And of course, the goal of this coverage is full coverage and of health services. So that's very important dimension. And of course, education. Education, we have made some progress. The big challenges we have are on superior or high-level education. We have sort of full coverage in elementary, preschool, and high school sort of level coverage, but superior education, university level or technical level, we're still lag behind. So the problem is in coverage in superior education, and the challenge now is also quality of education. So we have the pillar of security, the pillar of social cohesion, and the third one, of course, is the engine of growth associated to investment and business environment. We've seen how the GDP per capita and purchasing power parity is being growing steadily. We're reaching $10,000 per capita in purchasing power parity, and that continues to grow. And the third dimension in which we have sort of made major progress, as I mentioned, is in the business environment dimension. This is doing business report. If you're not familiar with that, it's a benchmark that's it's done by the World Bank and the IFC. They're trying to measure with objective variables the ease of doing business in different dimensions in the country. So they measure how difficult or timely or costly it is to open a business, to close a business, to import, to export, to hire somebody, to buy property, and they measure that with objective variables. And we love benchmarks because they're very good sources of information on identifying best practices around the world. And we've sort of made it a case to work steadier to improve and work on both our macro stability and good macro environment, but also at the micro level. We've been among the 10 top performers in the last 3 years in the Doing Business report, and that's how we've sort of jumped up in the last 4 years, 40 positions in that Doing Business report. I said the micro dimensions of the business environment have been very important. Something I don't have a graph for, but is associated to this is the importance and the trust not the international community and also the Colombian business sector is having in the country. Around the year 2001 and 2002, we were investing around 12 or 13% of our GDP was actual investment. Now that's gone up over 26, 27%. So that sort of assures some sort of sustainable growth. So we have ourselves and the world community investing in ourselves. So the dimensions in which we sort of have measured this sort of success has also been associated to a strategy we've sort of pursued since the year 2002, which is trying to insert more effectively our economy into the world. We believe that we can bring sustainable growth only if we are part of the global production chains. That's the way we see the world becoming smaller and smaller. We have actually taken a very proactive part of this global production chain. So we've been very actively trying to diversify and integrate our economy until very recently just with our usual partners. That has proven very effective. As this graph shows, we have sort of more than quadrupled the amount of foreign direct investment we're attracting. And the numbers we have so far this year is a 50% growth compared to last year. So it's FDI is growing very, very fast, but most of the foreign direct investment comes from the usual markets, being that the US and the EU, especially the United Kingdom and Spain. Ambassador of Spain is here, big investor in the country, and Mexico as well. So it's basically the usual trading partners we have are the sources of foreign direct investment we're attracting. We have also seen that in the size of trade. We have tripled the amount of trade we are doing with the rest of the world. Last year we nearly reached 40 billion. This year we're aiming at probably 50 billion, because I was reading that you've had some sort of decrease in your exports in Australia. In Colombian case, we measuring quarter to quarter, we grew this year 38% compared to last year. So we're probably going to reach over $50 billion export this year, which is an important amount relative to our economy. And our trading partners has been basically the U.S. and the EU and our neighbors. China showed up. It's growing very fast as well. Although it's more volatile, our trade with China, because it's concentrated basically on oil and a little bit of coal. So this year it's going down again. But still, we still have this challenge of trying to diversify our economic class with the rest of the world. But as you see, we're playing a bigger role in the world community with these numbers. A third of these dimensions is tourism. We're barely reaching the numbers we had 20 years ago. We are attracting a little bit. Here it says 1.8 million foreign tourists in 2010, most of them coming from the U.S., Venezuela, Ecuador, and Argentina. So, but we're growing a lot faster than the rest of the world, attracting tourists as well. We have this campaign trying to overcome the problem of the perception we have on security issues, and we have a big campaign in Colombia's fashion, and Colombia's, they would say the only risk of going to Colombia is wanting to stay. That's the way we sell it. So regarding openness and towards economic growth, realizing that's something that I just said, being a medium-sized economy, you can't grow in a sustainable way by being autarkic. So you have to sort of try to insert effectively into the world, and we've been doing that by trying to access and offer our business community preferential access, or at least zero tariff access to most of our trading partners. So this is the goods and services dimension. We were trying to, as I say when I describe my job, try to do some legal pavement for the business sector to cross the bridges. One of them is, of course, stable preferential access to different markets, attracting investment, and something else we're also developing is also accompanying Colombian investment abroad, because last year Colombians invested abroad over $6 billion. So that's also very important. We don't have this mercantilistic view that exports are goods and imports are bad, or FDI towards the economy is good and investment abroad is bad. We feel that integration is multidimensional. So we welcome the numbers and we want to see them grow and diversify. And for that, we want to as well diversify our trade. I'm going to show a little bit about that. But our trade is still too concentrated, mostly within Latin America and North America, with Europe, but with Asia Pacific we lag behind. So, and we realized from just being part of this chains of trade and investment there are big spillovers there. Spillovers in productivity, enhancing factors like actual technological spillovers, or is it knowledge on specificities of consumers around the world that we want to be exposed to in order to diversify the value added that we can create within our economy. So that is part of our strategy. And as we're doing this, it's like we're trying to build this bridge, as I mentioned before, with the rest of the world. Trying to, as we're a country that believes in the market forces with regulation, of course, rule of law, protection of property rights. That's very sort of consistent with the idea offering the most assurances to the business community, and that we do through legal payment, through agreements. So we have sort of already made it a case to negotiate very comprehensive and ambitious agreements. And we have a constitutional command of making Latin America and the Caribbean a priority, and that you see on the green side. I know there's a mistake we have, because we have agreements both with Paraguay and Uruguay, so there's a mistake over there. But Latin America was basically covered, all of Latin America. We have signed agreements with Canada, US, the European Free Trade Association, and with the EU. The European Free Trade Association is coming into force on the 1st of July. The Canadian is coming into force probably on the 1st of August or 1st of September. You've probably heard a little bit, and I'm more than willing to answer questions if you have, on our FTA with the US, which was finished negotiating in 2006. We have very sort of good news, hopeful news regarding that. And we also finished with our partners of Peru, negotiating with the EU. Last year we sort of signed the legal scrubbing of the text like 2 months ago, and we are in the process of translations and all of those things. We hope to have the agreement in place sometime next year. So that's what we have in force and what we have signed. We're currently negotiating with Panama. It's a negotiation which is nearly complete. With South Korea, and a negotiation which we think is 85% complete. We have, as we've talked with Australia, probably similar problems in trying to find a way to finish those deals because there are special sensitivities in the Korean side. We're currently, today, we're at this right moment, no, because they must be asleep, no, or they're waking up, something like that. Negotiating with Turkey. The Turkish team is currently in Bogota, so we're negotiating an agreement with Turkey. And we have as well the case of Venezuela. Venezuela used to be part of the Andean community. They denounced the agreement a little bit over 5 years ago, and the rules of agreement provided for the continuation of the preferences for 5 years. So we have yet to establish and sign and negotiate a new trade agreement. Our colleagues from Peru are negotiating as well with Venezuela, so are we. We extended our preferences for the time being, so that covers the goods sector and these kinds of agreements, and we'll be having meetings in the next few weeks to try to restart the discussions on the agreement. Both presidents have agreed, President Chavez and President Santos have agreed that we should finish in the very near future. In the future, we're of course knocking at doors for other trading partners. One of the messages that I've brought to Australia has been that when we started this covenant, we of course do an assessment on what our trade agenda should be, and we do that very scientifically, as you say. We just measure different sort of dimensions of why one should try to negotiate a free trade agreement with other countries. Things like preserving some access you have, because countries might be given preferential access to some of your competitors, so that's one of the dimensions. Also try to fulfill the potentials of bilateral trade. We run gravitational models and general equilibrium models to try to point out the potentials over there. We have also the political dimension, the good behavior in the world, trade system dimension, variables. We have a whole set of variables, and the outcome of that result gave us Australia as number one, which is surprising in a way because our trade figures right now are very small. But we brought that message, and of course Japan is number two, and so we have a list of 15 countries with whom we were more than ready to start negotiations, which are not all of them here, but those are part of them. Of course, you see Australia over there. It's second on that number because we've been talking to the Japanese for a few years now regarding this kind of next steps. So a strategy with the Asia Pacific. Strategy with Asia Pacific. One thing which is very hard to understand and explain is Colombia is not a member of APEC. We've asked for entry into APEC since 1995. We've had the moratorium for 10 years, and so part of this trip has been part of the strategy we have is we have to make presence and talk to all the APEC members, making the case for Colombian accession to APEC. We want to be part of the fora. It's natural for us, being in the Pacific, the relative size we have when compared to other members that are already part of APEC. We have the support of our Latin American friends present already in APEC, and not only from them. No country has said anything against Colombian intention or aspiration of being part of the group. We're already participating in certain APEC groups, and we want to raise our profile and our presence in some of them. And we're going to try to build a case for our entry into APEC. Because, and something else, we visited ASEAN as well. We want to start building more bridges with ASEAN. The relative size of Colombia might not be too interesting for ASEAN, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more something that Patti mentioned on a recent development on our side of the world. And the TPP, we've been wanting to participate in the TPP from the beginning, Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. But we've been kept, the only reason I can give for us not being part of this is that we're not part of APEC. For some reason, sometimes in the discussions they decided it was a process just involving APEC members, and as we're not yet an APEC member, we're not participating in those discussions. But we've sort of requested observer status or something, because it's very much in line with what we want to do. So we have an aspiration to be part of the TPP. We have, of course, sometimes it's easier to negotiate a bilateral investment treaty rather than a full-fledged FTA. And we've done that with both China, with India, with South Korea, and with Japan. We sometimes engage in a smaller level of commitment through memorandums of understanding, like the one we have with Australia, and we have, of course, with other countries that I mentioned over there. A recent development I want to spend a couple of minutes in is the Pacific Alliance. You might not be aware of this. This was an initiative of President of Peru last year. He invited a few countries to try to build a deeper integration. Yes, we've had a dialogue fora, which we call the Foro del Arco del Pacífico, which comprises all the countries with coasts on the Pacific. We've been discussing and building on 4 dimensions. One of them is integration in the goods sector, trying to negotiate accumulation of origin, things like that, very technical. Trade facilitation, investment, different dimensions that we've been discussing for 3 or 4 years with this group. But we are not seeing this group growing as fast as we want. So President Garcia had this idea to invite a few of the countries to try to go faster and try to build a stronger and deeper integration. So finally last year, the presidents of Mexico, Peru, Chile, and Colombia agreed to start those discussions. That was November, December last year. Of course, they sent ministers to try to work on a draft of that. There was a ministerial meeting in January, but the presidents met again last April 28th, and relaunched that, and they committed to meet again in Mexico by December to assess the progress. But it's a very interesting development because we already have free trade agreement among the four of us. So it's actually deepening the commitments we have in the usual dimensions of the FTAs, try to work on regulatory aspects and complementary disciplines associated to an integration. But it's an integration which is particular in a sense because it's trying to bring the advantages of having a unified region for itself, but mostly to project itself as an attractive partner and region for the rest of the world, and especially with the Asia Pacific. So there are two dimensions: it's deepening the integration and projecting this region as an attractive region to start building stronger bridges with this side of the world. That was part of the message we brought to ASEAN. We're trying to organize a meeting between ministers of foreign affairs, most probably this year, of the Pacific Alliance, as we call it, and ASEAN. So you'll see some activities there. The vice ministers are going to be meeting in just 2 weeks. We'll have my colleagues visit me in Bogota so that we can make progress in that dimension. So these are the numbers. As you see, most of our trade is still with North America, with the US and Canada. As well, it's big with Latin America. In Europe, here you have it, and the Asia Pacific, it's relatively small relative to its potential. We realize we have to, as Patti was saying, our priorities, not only in political but in economic terms, are looking into this direction. I think there's a very, very big potential to increase those numbers. It's not only the levels, which is the first challenge, to increase the levels. We have to diversify what we're doing and who we're doing it with, because 80% of our exports are concentrating in oil, coal, and ferronickel, and coffee. We have to diversify, and that we can do through the identification of niches and things like that. And also for 80% of our trade is done just with 4 countries, which are China, Japan, Singapore, and South Korea. The fourth dimension is, of course, attracting investment. Remember what I said. We're sort of attracting around $10 billion per year in FDI. And in the amount of investment from the region we have attracted in the last 8 years, not in the mining sector, in the rest of them, have been only $2 million. No, it's only $200 million. So it's incredibly small compared to what we have already, where we're attracting from the rest of the world. And remember what I said, for us seeing integration as being a multi-dimensional thing. With investment comes trade, movement of people, and tourism, and all of that. So we are looking for all of those kind of specific and concrete linkages. Here we have trade with Australia. We trade basically $70 million, which is small. Let's be generous. It's very small. It's kind of volatile. We basically export coffee to Australia, and we import machinery. And you don't see a trend, a dramatic trend there. So that's why we've also come with this message. It's not only that we have these models that tell us that we should negotiate a free trade agreement, we have to do some very proactive work. We had meetings with Australia yesterday. And of course, I'm going to I'm taking back some messages and some ideas on what the word should be for our export and investment promotion agency, which is pro-export. We have to engage more actively and proactively our business community to start flying the long hours to try to identify the specific opportunities we have over there. Again, Colombia has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. We're proactively trying to be part of the global production change. Asia Pacific is a priority, and within that region we have number one, Australia. Regarding Australia, we want to deepen our economic and political ties. There are many coincidences on many things, as Patti was saying, the dimensions in which we meet at that in multilateral organizations, both in the political and the trade side as well, because we coincide very much in what our agenda and our views on the Doha Round and the WTO. We're very proactive members over there, members of the Cairns Group. We have many dimensions in which we can sort of come closer with our Australian interests, and to kind of just fire everywhere. We've sort of identified 3 sectors in the real side in which we could establish our priorities to try to build more proactive agenda, and those of course are the agribusiness and the mining. Mining sector is very important because we want to learn from it's not only the capital we want to attract. We want to attract the work ethics, the technology, and of course not only the business sector but the knowledge on the institutional regulatory aspects of mining, because we have big challenges as well in the Colombian side, because it's a sector that's growing dramatically, and we want the capital, we want the actors, and we want some sort of cooperation as well. It's not only the mining, but also the related services. We need, and of course we have big challenges in infrastructure. We want the business community of Australia to participate in those challenges, because we envisage major investments in Colombia in those lines. So this is it. Thank you very much. And as I said,